Hindi ako mahilig soba, pero sobrang sarap nito. Medyo mas malaki pa sa mukha ko yung pork chop. Wow.
You're getting the top. You want the white pork chop?
Is it yummy?
Chino. That's
No, nice. Wow. Yummers. Nice. Patay. Tayong beef soup. Coke sa akin. Apat lang. Pwede na rin. Apat lang. So crunchy. Hello. So we're done with tasty dumplings and we're now going to NBT. Ta-da! good evening and welcome to another edition of Atty.H Legal Diaries. And it's so amazing because we just came from a really nice food trip weekend with the family over at Binondo, one of the oldest districts in Manila. It's in Chinatown. It's actually the oldest Chinatown in the world, if I'm not mistaken. And everything was really yummy. We went to this place called Tasty Dumplings and had the most amazing, of course, dumplings. But I had the most amazing fried pork chop ever. So my husband, Yui, was actually telling me that the pork chop or the breading that they use for the pork chop is actually made of 5-spice more than anything. So 5-spice is a very common ingredient for Chinese cooking. So it's very, very good. It's very, very tasty. Not to mention the size of the pork chop. It's like the size of my entire face almost, if not bigger. And it had a really nice texture to it. It was really crunchy. And then the rice had soy. All of these elements playing in your mouth. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful food. Actually, driving into the Chinatown district in Manila is actually also riveting, so to speak, kasi dun pa lang makikita mo yung history. Yung pagdaan mo pa lang sa Ayala Bridge, Jones Bridge, makita mo dun, grabe, dun nagsisimula, Jones Bridge. Amazing architecture. When you enter into Jones Bridge and into Chinatown, oh my goodness, explosion of colors. So nice. It's so well preserved. It reminds me a lot of Colon. It's the oldest street in the Philippines. It had the same feel. Sobrang mararamdaman mo talaga yung heritage, yung history. Ang galing lang. Yung arc, yan, yung Filipino-Chinese friendship arc, ayan. Ang ganda-ganda. And then, everything moving forward is really a mesh of Filipino and Chinese culture. So, for today, for this vlog, we are going to talk about culture and kung paano siya na-integrate sa batas. Arts and culture. So when you say culture, Philippines, pagkain, food, music, lahat yan. It all plays a part in arts and culture. And the 1987 Constitution, particularly Article 14, Section 14, actually states that the Philippines or the state shall foster the preservation, enrichment, and dynamic evolution of a Filipino national culture based on the principle of unity in diversity in a climate of free artistic and intellectual expression. Sinasabi sa Constitution na ang arts and ang culture are part of the country's historic wealth and a source of cultural treasure that should be at all times protected by the state. There are also, apart from the Constitution, other laws that actually recognize cultural wealth of the nation, such as having historic holidays in relation to Chinese food trip Binondo weekend. It brings to mind the recent Chinese New Year or the Spring Festival, popularly known as the Chinese New Year. So there's always a proclamation by the president on when this special holiday would be. But by law, Chinese New Year every year, whenever it would be celebrated, is actually a special non-working holiday. So it's not just the Chinese New Year that we're really celebrating and, remembering and commemorating with our holidays, but the law also talks about other holidays such as Eid al-Adha for our fellow Muslims, Eid al-Fitr. Even if we're not Muslim or even if we're not Chinese, we get to celebrate these cultural holidays because we recognize, or this is really in line with the Constitution, that we recognize culture and history. We have to recognize that the Philippines is a melting pot of cultures through its diverse citizens. More than those laws that were mentioned, commemorating holidays and the provisions of the 1987 Constitution, we also have the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009. I guess ito yung pinakagusto kong objective nila na nakasulat. It says, the state shall likewise endeavor to create a balanced atmosphere where the historic past coexists in harmony with modern society. It's beautiful. Beautifully written. So, under this law, not only does Philippines afford recognition to these cultural sites or cultural properties, but also meron ding mga priorities or sinasabing incentives. There are tax exemptions on donations with respect to donations that are given in any form to the National Commission for Culture and its affiliated cultural agencies. It would be, I guess, exempt from donors tax. And the same would be, if it's exempt from donors tax, it could be, or it will be considered an allowable deduction from the gross income in the computation of the income tax of the donor. So it's really good. And the commission could also provide financial assistance in the form of grants to historic, archaeological, architectural, and artistic organizations for the conservation and research on cultural property. What's nice about this law is there's actually penal provisions or merong mga penalties for violations of this particular law. And hefty actually yung penalties. There is a penalty of a fine of not less than 200,000 pesos or imprisonment of not less than 10 years. So, magbabayad ka ng at least 200,000 or makukulong ka rin for not less than 10 years if you do any of the prohibited acts under the law. What's cool about this law also is the endowment provision or merong tinatawag na donation or grant or fund coming from the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation or PAGCOR in the sum of 500 million pesos. Yan, 500 million pesos per year for 5 years towards the establishment of a national endowment for culture and the arts. Wow! Actually, hindi lang sa PAGCOR, meron ding appropriations from the government at the rate of 100 million pesos per year for 5 years, again, specifically earmarked for culture and the arts. So it's really nice to have specific funding, for purposes of protecting arts and culture. So this vlog really wishes to convey that cultural heritage is really not just things, or it's really not just yung mga nakikita natin sa museum. Culture is always alive. What's good about culture in the Philippines is, most especially food, is that we're all here to be ambassadors of the said culture or food anywhere we go. And the more we get exposed to different kinds of cultures, whether it be food or experiences or music, visual arts, etc., etc., I think the more we can progress as a nation because na-appreciate mo yung mga finer things. Again, cultural preservation is actually also a strategy in maintaining the Filipino identity. Anyway, I hope you learned a thing or two with me, Attorney H, as we discussed briefly the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009 and some of the laws existing in the Philippines in relation to culture. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye!